November 1930. Northern Canada. The land is silent in the way that only the deep wilderness can be. A silence so complete, it has weight. A silence that presses against your chest. A fur trapper named Joe Labelle is making his way along the frozen shoreline of Anjikuni Lake in what is now the Kivalliq region of Nunavut. He has walked this route before. He knows this place. He knows the Inuit village that sits at the edge of the water. A small, close-knit community of hunters and fishermen. Perhaps 30 souls in total. He can see the huts ahead. Smoke should be rising. Dogs should be barking. Children should be running across the ice. But there is nothing. No smoke. No sound. No movement. Long pause. Wind swells. Joe Labelle walks into the village. And he finds nothing. Not a single person. Not a single soul. An entire community, men, women, children, elders, gone. Vanished. As if the earth itself had swallowed them whole. On November 26, 1930, readers across Canada woke up to a headline that stopped them cold. The front page of the Medicine Daily Journal carried words that would echo through the decades. Village of the Dead. The story that followed was unlike anything printed in a Canadian newspaper before. Joe Labelle, an experienced trapper who knew the northern wilderness as well as any man alive, had stumbled upon a scene that defied every rational explanation. He had arrived at the Anjikuni Lake settlement expecting the warmth of familiar faces, perhaps a shared meal, the laughter of a village going about its life. Instead, he found a ghost town, frozen in time, like a photograph of a moment that had been suddenly, violently interrupted. The cooking pots were still hanging over cold fire pits. Meals, half prepared, half eaten, sat abandoned on the ground. Rifles, the most valuable possessions a northern hunter could own, were leaning untouched against the walls of huts. No Inuit hunter would willingly leave his rifle behind. Not in the wilderness, not in winter, not under any circumstance. And the sled dogs, the animals that pulled the community's sleds, that were essential for travel and survival, were found buried under a snowdrift nearby. They had starved to death, tied up, left behind, frozen. Whatever had happened here, it had happened fast. Too fast for anyone to take what they needed. Too fast for anyone to think. Joe Labelle did not wait around to ask more questions. He made his way to the nearest telegraph station and sent an urgent message to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. The RCMP responded immediately. Officers were dispatched to Anjikuni Lake through some of the most brutal winter terrain in the world. When they arrived, they confirmed everything Labelle had reported, and found details even more disturbing. The village's food stores were intact. No one had taken the dried fish and meat that would have been essential for survival on a journey through the winter tundra. Clothing, heavy furs, winter gear, remained inside the huts. People had apparently left without the protection they would need to survive a single night in temperatures that plunged far below freezing. Most chillingly of all, the investigators found the village graveyard. The graves had been disturbed. The burial mounds had been opened. The stones that marked and covered the graves of the community's ancestors had been moved, arranged in two neat piles. The remains themselves were gone. Let that settle for a moment. Whoever, or whatever, had taken the living had also, it seemed, taken the dead. The RCMP launched one of the most extensive searches in Canada's northern history. Search parties fanned out across hundreds of miles of frozen wilderness. They interviewed neighboring communities, checked every trading post, every mission, every known route through the region. They found nothing, not a single track in the snow leading away from the village. Not a trace of the people who had lived there. Not a body, not a clue. 30 people had disappeared from the face of the earth. and they were never found. In the years and decades that followed, many explanations were proposed for what happened at Anjikuni Lake. None of them were ever proven. Some are rational, some are less so. The first theory, mass migration. Perhaps, some researchers suggested, the community had received some kind of warning, a sign of incoming danger, a spiritual vision, a message from a neighboring group, and had moved quickly, taking nothing, traveling somewhere new. Perhaps they resettled and simply disappeared from recorded history. But this explanation struggles against the evidence. The dogs were left tied up and starving. You do not leave your dogs to die if you are making a deliberate journey. The dogs are the journey in the northern wilderness. You do not leave your food, your rifles, your winter clothing. These are not the actions of a planned departure. The second theory, mass disaster. A sudden epidemic, perhaps. A toxic gas leak from the frozen ground. Some environmental catastrophe that killed everyone instantly and left no visible remains. But the RCMP found no bodies, no evidence of illness, no mass grave. The village simply showed the signs of a life interrupted, not a life ended. The third theory, something else entirely. This is where the story entered the realm of the unexplained, and it has never fully left. Witnesses in the area around the time of the disappearance reportedly described strange lights in the sky over Anjikuni Lake. Unusual, fast-moving lights that hovered and darted in ways that no aircraft of 1930 could replicate. This detail, combined with the sheer impossibility of 30 people vanishing without a single footprint in the snow, has kept this story alive in the literature of unexplained phenomena for nearly a century. Was there a rational explanation that investigators simply could not find? Almost certainly, yes. That is the most honest answer. But that explanation, whatever it was, has never come. There is something about the Anjikuni Lake disappearance that resists closure. Perhaps it is the sheer scale of it, not one person missing, but an entire community. Perhaps it is the intimacy of the details, the half-eaten meals, the abandoned rifles, the starving dogs. Perhaps it is the graveyard. The graveyard. Of all the details in this story, it is the opened graves that disturb the deepest part of the human imagination. You can construct theories to explain why living people might flee in a hurry. But what force, what reason, what possible logic explains disturbing the graves of the dead? The Inuit communities of northern Canada lived in profound spiritual relationship with their ancestors. The dead were not simply buried and forgotten. They were honored, protected, kept. The idea that anyone from that community would voluntarily disturb those graves is almost incomprehensible. Which means, if the community did not do it themselves, then something else did. And that something has never been identified. On November 26, 1930, Canadians read the words, "Village of the Dead," over their morning coffee and felt the chill of something they could not name. Not the cold of a Canadian November. Something older than that. The story never resolved. The people of Anjikuni Lake were never found. Their names, their faces, their lives, absorbed into the vast, indifferent silence of the northern wilderness. Joe Labelle went back to trapping. The RCMP closed their investigation without a conclusion. The newspaper moved on to the next headline. But the village remained empty. And in the long, dark winters of northern Canada, when the wind moves across frozen lakes and the sky fills with colors no language quite captures, some people still wonder about the 30 souls who were there one day and gone the next. Who they were, what they saw, where they went, and whether, in some version of the Great Silence, they are still out there, waiting to be found.